Welcome everyone to the Witness Underground podcast. I'm Scott Homan. Today we have Anthony Mathenia, who is going to be talking about a comic graphic novel that he's worked on called Lucky, about crime bosses, and I'm sure you have a better pitch for that, and how it relates to a movie that is called Dope Men, which is on Amazon, and you can stream it now. It's a great documentary. And he's the next witness, and he's going to talk about his journey out and the community that he's found on the outside. How are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing very well here in the Ozarks. It's a beautiful day. We escaped the heat a little bit, so I don't know. It's really nice right now.
What is this project you're working on? And it sounds really exciting.
So, yeah, what has recently been released is a graphic novel. It's a biographic novel about the old crime boss that some people know about, Lucky Luciano. It was a 10-year project, more or less, putting together the comic book, and not only that, getting all the extra resources and writing all the articles and stuff that go along with it. So it's a lot more than just a graphic novel. It's about 100 pages of comic. And then beyond that, we've got tons and tons of additional nonfiction content just talking about Lucky Luciano and his place in America history.
Amazing. Yeah, I'd never actually heard of the guy. My perspective is like it's an introduction, like a prequel to the Narcos series about Pablo Escobar and the Mexican Narcos. I feel like it's like, well, if you go back 80 years, there's another history that started that or played a role.
Exactly. A companion to the graphic novel or vice versa is this documentary that we've got out. It's called Dope Men, America's First Drug Cartel. And that's one of the purposes of the documentary. A lot of people hear the war on drugs. They think Nixon, they think Reagan, they think, just say no. But the war on drugs actually goes back to, the early 1900s with these guys like Lucky Luciano, Legs Diamond, Arnold Rothstein. That was the start of the war on drugs. And it's, you can't really understand Mexican cartels or, the crack epidemic in the inner cities and things like that without properly understanding in the context of where this all started. And where it started was with these Godfather, Goodfella types like Lucky Luciano.
Incredible. And what role did you play in it? And how do people read it, watch it, get involved? What's the state of the project? 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, well, the graphic novel, it took a long time to produce. We're really happy to see it finish. But what kind of was cool about it is the documentary Dope Men came much later, within the last, 3 years or so. And as part of making the documentary, one of the things was we got the idea that we could take the individual panels of art that we already had in the Lucky comic and then animate them and kind of freshen them up and bring them to be part of the documentary. So a lot of the art that you see in the comic book is the same art that's in the documentary. We just got it moving and stuff like that.
That's really cool to have a documentary that's sort of built off of a graphic novel that's based on reality is something I've never actually heard of before, I don't think.
And then one of the things about it, that was kind of cool. I mean, it wasn't just me working on the comic book. It was at least 10 other people who never thought they'd be part of a documentary either. So everybody gets a big kick out of getting that IMDb credit and, seeing your name at the end of a documentary. I mean, especially the team on the documentary, Yevigny, who did the art for it, he really worked hard. My role in the comic book was simply editor, color, letterer, jack of all trades. But a lot of the other people, like Christian Cipollini, who wrote it, and then Yevigny Francet, he did the art, and those guys were the real heavy lifters on the project. So it's cool to see their work out there like this. If folks want to check out the documentary, it's called Dope Men, America's First Drug Cartel. That's available on Amazon, Apple, Google Play, YouTube, wherever you want to rent and or buy it. And then the graphic novel, we have a collector's hardcover edition that's available on Amazon. You can also check out the Kindle version if you're on that Kindle program. I forget what's called. You can read it for free. And what's cool, Kindle Unlimited. And what you've got is like where you can click on the panels and it goes from panel to panel to panel. It's very, very fluid. It's a real cool way to read it. So that's also available on Amazon. And then we'll have a paperback trade coming later down the road for that. My comic's called Lucky.
That's great. I think that'd be perfect for a little Kindle or a screen that can do one panel at a time.
Yeah.
Because I was struggling to read it on a PDF on my phone. I'm like zooming in and scrolling over. And
yeah, no, they've really got it cool. I think it's called Panel View or something like that. It's really, really fluid, almost cinematic, really, if you put your comic book together. It just really flows nicely, and it's a real cool way to read it. And like I said, if you're on that Kindle Unlimited program, you can check out Lucky by Christian Cipollini and Yevgeny Frantsev for free, or as part of your Kindle program.
Amazing. That's great. You'd mentioned that there's going to be an event coming up in December that you're going to be doing, a number 4 talk at?
Oh, potentially doing a number 4 talk. I still got to work it out. What it is that we are going to be screening the Dopeman documentary at the Mob. Let the car go by. At the Mob Museum in Las Vegas on December the 14th. So if you're in the Vegas area and you're into mobsters and want to check that out, the director Seth Ferranti will be there. The writer producer Christian Cipollini will be there. I maybe be there. I don't know. Like I've been living in the woods, so I got to figure out, do I want to jump from the woods to Vegas? Because even as someone who was in society, Vegas kind of ranked really, really low on my list. But what might twist my arm, I'd like to give like I said, a number 4 talk about the history of crime comics. And really, this is another thing, is like, today we think about comics as just being superheroes, the Avengers, Spider-Man, Batman, but that's not how comics started in this country. There was a time when crime comics was the number 1 seller on the shelves. But then what happened, there was a lot of government censorship. The comic book code came in, and it really took a starting out art form and just basically crippled it, where the only stories you could tell back then were these kind of cheesy, corny superhero type stories. And that became, the dominant thing in American culture. But with a comic like Lucky, it's kind of a way for us to go back to the roots of kind of where this all began, and kind of give homage to those early crime comics, but also bring it up into a new era by making it really historically based, lots of fact based. It's very detailed, to the point that I call it a biographic novel, because it's really like reading a biography. So that's the talk I'd like to give there. Talk about, that transition, the early days of crime comics, what happened, how they gave rise to the superhero genre, and then where we're at the present time with crime comics.
Yeah, I wanted to read something that Cipollini wrote. He said, I had to make sure that the Lucky graphic novel was done in a way that captures both the spirit of the true crime story and also be able to reach the high standards expected of the graphic novel realm. And he had 2 goals in mind when starting the project: to keep it true in the crime part. And I like that, because I've never actually thought of a graphic novel or a comic as something that could be related as a documentary based on true stories, but maybe even the actual true story.
When I got involved in comics, I wasn't coming to it as one of these guys that, was a hardcore comic collector. Yeah, in the 90s when I was a teenager, I read the X-Men or whatever, but it was only later in life, after I got out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that I was looking at the next thing I wanted to do, because I was kind of ticking off boxes on my creative bucket list. That was, so I'd published a couple novels, so I got that out of the way. Okay, I'm a novelist now. What's next? And the thing that's always interested me was filmmaking. But when you get out of the Witnesses, you've got no community, you've got no one to work with, and you know what filmmaking is. You need somebody to.
How old are you
hold the boom? I'm like 29, 30 in this time period.
At this time when you left the religion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was trying to make up for lost time. I mean, I was like, I should have been doing this all in my 20s. But
you probably would have been a grip in your 20s, at least on one project, before you realized what you wanted to do, right?
Craft services, if nothing else. But so that didn't happen. So I was thinking about filmmaking, and I was like, well, that seemed like a big hurdle for where I was at in life at that time. So I was like, you know what I could do? I could make a comic book script, and I know I could probably find like one artist somewhere that will draw this thing for me. So I really just immersed myself in the world of comics, learning how it works, and reading folks like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison's, some of these kind of more literary type guys, Neil Gaiman, who also did comics. And what I found was it was I really enjoyed the way it could be used to tell a story. But the thing that kind of felt like I was like, well, this is great. You can tell a Superman story this way, but you can tell any kind of story this way. And so that was kind of the pitch in meeting Christian Cipollini. He was like, he wasn't a comic guy, but he was a writer. He'd written nonfiction books about Lucky, and he knew the history of Lucky forward and backwards. And it was like, okay, man, let me help you turn this into a comic. And that's how that process started.
It's really cool. It's like an extreme storyboard. You ever do a storyboard for a...
Yeah.
You ever do a storyboard for a visual art or a video?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never actually thought of it that way before, but...
It's basically doing the storyboards. And then when you see the art, the comic panels in the documentary, it's basically, not totally, but making that jump from storyboard to, animated production.
I enjoyed it too, 'cause I imagine when you're putting it together, you start to see something like, yeah, we could reveal this terrible situation, on page 100, or we could drop the audience right into that moment. And I felt like that's what happened. Like on the second page or the first page, there's a guy who's beat up and we don't know why, and neither do the cops, and he won't say anything. It's like you're sort of just like dropped into the scene. Everything's already unfolding around you, and it's immersive.
Yeah, that's how you got to think about it. And one of the things I like in comics to like haiku poetry, and that on the comic page, you've only got a certain amount of panels you can put on a page. And, each page has to have like a beginning, a middle, an end, a cliffhanger. You always want to end the page on a cliffhanger before you keep people turn to the next page.
Big
so it takes a lot of thought to construct this thing. It's not just throwing pictures and words on a page, but it has to have a flow. It has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And like in the case of a comic book, you've got 24 pages to work with of story, and maybe 6 to 9 panels per page. And if it's a heavy dialogue page, it's more panels. If it's big action, it's less panels. So it's just an interesting way to put your mind towards a creative way of telling a story. And I'll say it again, not just any story, or not just a superhero story, but any story.
Mm-hmm.
I feel can be turned into a comic book or a graphic novel. Maybe not a financially successful one or a marketable one, but it is a tremendous way to tell stories.
Yeah. I was very impressed. I would love to know more about your journey. So you had a list of things you felt like you missed out on. So you're playing catch up. I don't know where you want to be in that storyline, but go ahead and let us know more about that.
No, it's just like, I don't know, like a lot of people I would say that were raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. Every time in my life that I tried to go out there and do something creative when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I had to keep it on the down low. So, this elder wouldn't get offended or that elder wouldn't get offended. And then, and invariably someone would find out, or my parents would find out what I was doing. And it was nothing like really edgy or bad. It was just being creative. So it was always getting shut down. I remember talking to my dad, telling him how I wanted to write a novel. And he's like, oh, maybe instead you should think about learning how to become a welder. And, there's nothing wrong with being a welder. It's a fine profession, but that just wasn't me. So when I got out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, I was determined, try to make up for lost time.
I was going to ask, the reason why we know each other is because you were in a band called 6 After 2. That was a band you did with your creative partner.
Just like a light switch on a wall, this common sense goes on and on. Well, that's not all. He believes he's every girl's dream. He's Mr. Tough Guy. You know what I mean? Check him out, shut you out. Go, Mr. Tough. Go, Mr. Tough. Go.
that was within the Witness religion, right? And then knew everybody, or you connected to the people that I made the Witness Underground documentary about. Like I learned about you. I'd never met you, I don't think. We might have run into each other at the October Ridge that we feature in the film, but
we bumped shoulders.
I don't think either of us remember that. But it was me trying to use your music, and I reached out to your old bandmates, and they're like, "You're gonna have to talk to Anthony about that." And I was like, "Where is this Anthony guy?" And so I was doing like a huge internet search for who you are. I found a bunch of comic stuff, but it was some things that looked like that had been started and then were sort of not. They were sort of like nothing was happening, and I think it was like 6 months before maybe even a year before I actually got a reply, because you were off in Arkansas doing wood stuff in the woods. That's how I understand it. But anyway, 6 After 2, the music connection and like the connection to my movie, I was trying to at some point I was trying to include your music in the film. So was that what you're talking about when you're talking about your dad and like people in the religion?
I mean, that's just one example. I mean, there was many. The time I was in the school play, the time I wrote my first short story, the time I got really into hip hop art and graffitied someplace, it was just little stuff like that. But the band stuff, it was a similar story to, everybody in the documentary, in that, music, you could play music a little bit, but it had to be in your basement. We want to play out and we can't play here because it has alcohol, but it's a restaurant, but it still has alcohol. You can't play there. So it was just, that's just another example of how, we had to do stuff, but it was kind of you had to be quiet about it. You had to keep it on the down low. And that's what I thought was so tremendous about being invited to play at October Ridge, was that it was so unusual and unique for me because, it was celebrated there, at least in that little community of, I don't know how many people were at that October Ridge, 100 people maybe. But, you were cheered, you were celebrated, people enjoyed what you were doing. And like Eric says in the documentary, it was very, very special. And I'm glad that we got to connect after the fact. The reason I connected with you is I just found out about the documentary and watched it and was blown away. I was like, wow. I was like, wait a minute, I was there. But, music was just one example of it, one example of many. So when I got out, my big thing was I'm a writer, so I wanted to publish novels. And so I wrote a couple of cathartic XJW novels.
Could you go into that? Like what were the general themes?
So the first novel I wrote was called Paradise Earth Day Zero. And that book's very, very grim. It basically takes the idea that everything the Jehovah's Witnesses believe is going to happen in the future actually happens. But let's put a main character in that situation. What's it like to actually go through an Armageddon when people are dying? What's it like to be having to clean up the bodies of the dead? Because I read Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, where he talks about having to do that after the bombing of Dresden, Germany, and it was hellacious. But according to the witnesses, this is our happy hope for the future. And so for me, it was just like, okay, let's take these beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses and make them real. What would this really be like? So anyway, that book is very, very grim. It's called Paradise Earth Day Zero. I followed that up with Happiness, Next Exit, which was a very, very sweet story. I was trying to cleanse my palate, and I was kind of in the phase of like, oh yeah, being a witness sucked. But there were some good things about it, And it was kind of a more balanced, nuanced approach. It's about a young girl growing up in a rural congregation in Missouri, just getting into adulthood and figuring out who she is, what she wants to do, what she wants to be, but kind of having that rural, really controlling Jehovah's Witness community to deal with. And so that one's called Happiness Next Exit. They're still available on Amazon through the old publisher. I have the rights back to both of those books.
Oh, cool.
So my plan is to republish Happiness and then potentially continue the Paradise Earth story, which I sat away from my own mental well-being because I didn't want to be in that headspace for a long time. But I'm kind of at the point where I feel like I'm ready to revisit it.
And this, you said a third book?
No, I think exactly. It's a great idea. And one of the things that I love about the Witness Underground channel is because it does focus on ex-Jehovah's Witnesses getting out and doing creative things with their life, be it, dancing or music or art or writing, whatever it is, I mean, whatever your passion was as a witness, I mean, I think everybody's experienced that, not being able to do it to the fullest extent possible. One of the greatest gifts we have in no longer being witnesses is that we can pursue these things even if we're in our elder years of life. There's still time to do that. And I think I'd like people that are just getting out to understand, there is life ahead. All these dreams you had on hold, you are now free to pursue them. And if you do put in the work to pursue them, you can accomplish them. That's just how this works.
Right. Yeah, it made me think just now, like when I was working on my band, ADD Chronicles, and we changed it to Waking Life for when I was like doing the witness music thing. And when I was 21, I was really passionate, but it was one of those things, almost like using your language. Like I wanted to check off the box. Like I wanted to be a rock star when I was a teenager. Okay. So I was in a band and I played some graduation parties and I played some bars and it was fun. I realized it wasn't exactly my passion. But when you pursue music as an adult or you pursue writing or graphic novels, it's like you're in a different headspace. When you're 20, you're like, it would be so cool to be and fill in the blank. And you try it and you might not know what you're doing. You might half-ass it and then move on to something else. But like when you do something as an adult, you actually have this advantage of understanding how the world works, understanding a bit more how business works, understanding how to make connections and like make some movement that's not just like a half-assed attempt at something, which is what I felt like I was more doing at that time in my life, where now I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it properly. And I feel like maybe that's another little positive message. Like, even if you're older, it's okay. Mm-hmm. In fact, it might be better. You have some advantages, right?
Exactly. I mean, like, our backgrounds have given us some skills, like Ryan talks about in the doc, this DIY mentality that was very much a part of Nuclear Gopher. Creative people can collect skills within the Jehovah's Witnesses, even without the advantage of, art school or university education. But then when you get out into the world, that gives you the opportunity to network and meet the people that are going to help you take this to to the next level. Like, I don't care if you're writing a book in your basement, to get it out, it's a collaborative effort. You need editors, you need cover artists, you need publishers, you need all sorts of things. So, being able to have that big pond, no longer that small Kingdom Hall pond to draw from, you meet the right people that are going to help you and work with you to bring things to fruition. It was always a thrill. It's like, oh, it's our first time going on a radio show or something like that. Oh, it's our first time going to a comic convention and, trying to peddle our wares, Every little thing was just like so exciting for me because I was doing everything I always wanted to do but could never do, And so that was the thrill. And I did want to talk a little bit about that comic creator community stash, because that really helped me.
Yeah.
A lot.
Where are they based? And what do they do? And when did you get involved?
Well, I got involved with them. I got involved with them maybe like, let's say 3 years after I left the Witnesses. And really, when you leave, especially for someone like myself who was raised in, you've got no more friends. You got no community. In fact, you don't even know how to like go out and make friends that much because, what do you know about talking to worldly people and stuff like that? So what happened was I got interested in making comics. It just so happened there was a local comic book creator club that was starting up in this area called Edwardsville, Illinois, this little shop called Heroic Adventures. And just walked in one day with a bunch of other people that just walked in, and we kind of bonded and learned how to make comics together. We decided we'd make a little indie publishing house for our comics called Stash Publishing. We went from there to like doing comic anthologies and working with hundreds of comic creators, not just in the United States, but all over the world. There's only a couple continents that we never worked with anybody from. Or maybe even just one continent we never worked with anyone from. That'd be Antarctica. and then we started publishing other people's graphic novels. We were, going around to all these comic conventions, touring like we were rock stars almost. We'd hit all the big cities, Kansas City and stuff, like Charlotte, North Carolina was another good one. But yeah, we just kind of went all over, touring. And, part of it, I think, like Eric says in the documentary, the music was just an excuse to maintain friend relationships. Stash kind of making comics was an excuse for us to all be friends and all be buddies. And I'm still close to many of those people today. And, it was kind of transformative for me, and that it gave me my first real friend circle outside of the Witnesses. I look back on it now. Why did I really like it? I think it had that kind of Nuclear Gopher feel to it. This ragtag bunch of misfits. We're gonna do this stuff. We're gonna get together. We're gonna take on the world, and I'll do all this cool stuff. So I was really thankful for it. But as you talked about, it was me being, I guess, early 30s at that time, and everybody else in the group was in the early 20s. I was a whole decade ahead of them, but it worked out, and we got to do a lot of cool, fun stuff together. Which, in many ways, we put out a lot of good books, but in many ways, it was the camaraderie, the friendship, the creative community, all that parts of it. To me, was probably the most valuable part of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I actually had something similar at the same time of age, and I think we're about the same age. I'm born in '81. When I left the religion, I got into a band right away, and I was living in, I was traveling. I traveled with my girlfriend after leaving the religion for like a half a year, and then we came back to Colorado, and then I joined a band, and I was like, yeah, this is the thing I've been missing, because I did this through my teenage years and 20s. And then after like a year of that, or half a year of that, we threw house shows and stuff. Then I moved to Vietnam, and it was like, okay, new chapter. But in Vietnam, I met all these musicians, and then I really found a community there that I fell into that felt like home. And it was a similar thing. It was like, well, you guys are making music. I was making music, but I was like, but you guys are serious, and I'm just sort of like playing. I'm like catching up on old times, almost out of nostalgia, playing covers. Yeah. And then I was started filming them, which is what gave me all the skills, was like filming these people that became my friends. And a lot of them became my friends because I was filming them. And I was just like practicing the camera work. And I kind of had a similar thing. Like, it didn't even matter it mattered that I liked their music, and it mattered that I liked them, or that we liked each other. And it was just like everything else came natural after that, because we were hanging out with our friends, trying to help elevate each other's art to another status. And it was awesome. Yeah. It's kind of a similar parallel story, right?
Right. Like, if you're growing up in the Witnesses, or you're part of the Witness organization, and you're a creative person, you might be the only one in your Kingdom Hall, or even in your circuit, that writes books. You might be one of a handful that paints, or something like that. You're in a small group that's into music and stuff. But oftentimes you're alone in what you're doing. But when you're out, like I said, you're no longer in the small pond. You're in a big ocean, and you just have to find other people that share what you're into, and bond over that. And like you said, elevate each other. And elevate your art, and learn and collaborate. And that's one of the things I liked about comic making. It wasn't just me as a writer, or someone else as an artist. You have someone who colors the page, you have editors, you have someone that puts the book together, you have someone that does the little letter balloons and the sound effects. It's a big collaborative thing to produce a comic in similar ways, like a documentary film or something like that.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I feel like I made the documentary alone, because I did this huge amount of it. But when you look at the credits, it's obvious that it was like every time someone else got involved, it made it better. And it wouldn't be as good, or as at that high level, or it probably wouldn't have gotten into any film festivals. And we got into 11, 6 worth mentioning, but we got into more. And it's because people saw it, and they're like, you know what? I could help you make it better. Here's the thing that I see that I could do. And especially one great example was a graphic artist out of Belgium. He saw some stuff we were doing, I was putting out, and he reached out to me. And it was like, for me, it was like, dude, the film is done. And now you want to change something?
Oh,
and then
real?
He's like, yeah, but these parts just like bring it down to like YouTube quality. And I think I could do something to make it better. And he did. His name's Klaus Deleuze. He's like, let me take some photos and let me do some graphic work. And let me I got an idea to make these CD covers look really pro. And he did this graphic work. And he took his own photos and he did some blending. And those became like the shots of all the CDs. Like it was just like a really this is a JPEG of the CD art. And now it's like someone holding the actual CD for almost all but one of the CDs. And, like that little thing and that kind of dedication and that interest to be a part of it, it goes so far to bring the quality level up.
Oh, for sure. Like I tell people that are wanting to be writers or want to write a novel or book or something like that. It's like, yeah, you can write all day long, but you get an editor involved. They will help you make the book. Maybe you don't have the art or design skills, find somebody that does and give your book a good cover and stuff like that. I'm really into collaboration and, cause I've seen how it elevates. And even like with what we're doing now with, the books I'm helping with Guerrilla Convict Publications or the documentary work I'm doing with Outlaw Films, there's always this push to make it better. It's like, okay, we did some light animation for the first Dope Man, America's first drug cartel with the Lucky storyboards or comic panels. Next time, can we have more movement? How can I learn After Effects better? And, and
I was going to ask you about...
It's part of a team effort, and you've got everybody in the team saying, okay, this looks great. The next one has to be better, and just always pushing each other towards that goal.
Right, and then just... the idea of using your comic graphic novel panels in the movie and adding movement, that's a really cool idea. And then, it's like you learn how it works and you learn how you feel about it. And the next time I'm sure you'll be like, well, we know how to do that because we did it for a whole movie. Well, how can we outdo ourselves, right?
Yeah, we're actually talking about taking the whole comic and animating it and putting it on Seth Ferranti's True Crime YouTube channel, which... I don't know. We're talking about it. I got to get in and see how tough or how hard this is going to be. But, I actually want to get more movement in it. And just everything you do is a learning experience for the next thing, Making the comic was a learning experience for the documentary. And, now with the documentary, it's going to be a learning experience to step into doing more animation and learning better graphics and stuff like that. So we can really, plus up what we're trying to do.
It's also a nice thing to think about is I want to make a documentary one day in my life, but your first documentary is not going to be your best documentary, probably. My prototype for a documentary was this one about music in Vietnam. And it was, and I kind of went into it, I was like, I just want to make something because I want to learn. I want to do the whole thing from beginning to end. Can I do that? I've done 7-minute things, I've done 5-minute things, I've done 10-minute, the longer it is, the harder it gets. And the more times you have to change little things, but and then there's many interviews. But each thing leads to the next thing. And I think it's good to realize that I've been obsessing with perfectionism on this documentary because for me, it's a super important documentary, but now making a short doc is I'll do that this week. I'll make something, I'll pump out a couple podcast episodes because that's the easy stuff, but that could be someone's hardest thing at some point. And we're always leveling up, and I have another documentary idea, I wanted to ask you about Guerrilla, Convict, Outlaw Films, and Fathom, because at the end of the credits, you have these 3 logos on a panel. And you just mentioned Outlaw Films. Who are they? How are you involved with them?
So Guerrilla Convict is in Outlaw Films. That's Seth Ferranti. He's the head of the Outlaw Film Studio and the head of Guerrilla Convict Publications. Okay. Seth's had an interesting story that's been covered in Rolling Stone. It was featured on the Vice TV show, I Was a Teenage Felon. But the short of it is, when he was a young man, I think early 20s, 21, 22, he went to, he was charged as an LSD kingpin on the East Coast. He faked his suicide, went on the run for 2 years, finally was apprehended, ended up going to prison for 21 years as a first-time nonviolent offender for LSD distribution. So pretty serious sentence.
Wow.
This was the height of the war on drugs, and when all these mandatory minimums were coming in for drug offenses, and he was kind of on that first wave of people that got locked up, for marijuana and LSD on a very, very, very long sentence. But his story to me has always been inspirational because while he was locked up, he started a writing career. First, it was writing little articles for prison journals. Then it went to where he was writing a column for Vice while he was locked up in national magazines. He started writing for Don Diva, writing for Feds, writing for Real Crime UK, just all these places. And then he started a publishing house, Guerrilla Convict, while he was incarcerated and started writing books about basically the people he was locked up with. This is in the early days of hip hop.
Must be so many stories.
Yeah, exactly. Gangster rap's coming out, and people are name dropping these hood legends, these street legends. Like Wayne Perry, like Frank Matthews, like Supreme. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm locked up with these guys. Let me tell your stories because there are no books out here about you guys. And he ended up publishing 21 books from behind bars.
That's amazing because you see in TV like the PI coming to visit a prisoner and then having like a 20-minute conversation and then like that's it. And they write a book about this guy they met across the table in chains. And that's what you see in TV. But I've never thought about it from the other side. Like you can get pencils and paper in prison. That might be the only things you can get. So interesting.
And you can also
the rise of hip hop. Like that's an incredible tie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I always say he was in the wrong place at the right time, something like that. But yeah, it worked out for him. He had to go to the hole a couple of times because of his prison writing. He was writing about injustices within the system, the injustices and then the racist nature of the war on drugs and things like that. But his story resonated with me. I've never been locked up. I didn't serve 21 years in prison, but I did do 29 years or so as a Jehovah's Witness. And, I could relate to having creativity on hold, because you can write books in prison, but his passion's always been wanting to become a filmmaker. And so when he got out, that's when I met him. He was very enthusiastic about doing comics with me. I was enthusiastic about doing comics with him because, like I always said, I feel comics are a great medium to tell all sorts of stories. And he already had all these true crime books and things like that. And guys he was working with, like Christian, let's start making comics. But then since his release, he kept to his goals of becoming a filmmaker. And that's what Outlaw Films is his own film studio. Again, he made those connections in prison where he was writing a guy named Rick Hershey Jr. Who's better known as White Boy Rick. There was a Matthew McConaughey movie made about White Boy Rick. And then the opportunity opened up for Seth to work with a director, and they made this documentary called White Boy. During the pandemic, when everyone's on lockdown, that documentary White Boy went Netflix top 10, like not just documentaries, but top 10 of all Netflix. And that opened the door for him to really pursue and start getting these documentaries like Dopeman made. So Outlaw Films is Seth Ferranti. And then what was the other one? Fathom Studios. That's his editor for that Dopeman project. He's got several editors he works with, but that's Levi Barnes of Fathom Studios was the editor on the project.
That's so interesting. So you knew about him when he was incarcerated, and you tried to meet up with him after, and that was successful, and now you're working together.
Kind of, sort of. I had a mutual acquaintance who was in a halfway house in St. Louis the same time Seth was. And this guy had brought me some, postcards and books that Seth had written and given him. And he's like, oh, you got to meet this guy. I can tell he's going to do things in life because that's just Seth. If you talk to him or listen to him on any of the podcasts he's been on, he's incredibly driven. And so, we met at the Schlaf. I got his number. We met the Schlafly Brewery there in St. Louis and, really started talking about working together. And, that, like I said, lucky, was on and off to make that comic for about 10 years. But within the last 2 years since this filmmaking thing's blowed up for him, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I need somebody to handle the book publishing thing for me with Gorilla Convict." And I was like, okay, once a publisher, always a publisher, I guess. And so it was really a nice thing because it's online work. It's allowed me to pursue my dreams, to live in the middle of nowhere and hide in the woods and really pursue my creative dreams. Because
that's great. Wow.
I mean, there was a time in my life where, I think there's a GTFO phase of leaving the witnesses. You may have experienced that with Vietnam. I tried to do that with Asheville, North Carolina, which, has a reputation of being a creative place where a lot of people are doing creative things. But when I got to Asheville, I realized that the creative things people were doing were creatively trying to figure out how to juggle 2 jobs and 4 side hustles to pay rent, and creatively trying to figure out how to drink between said jobs. And it just didn't allow time for a lot of creativity, even though it was a very creative place filled with a lot of unique and interesting people. So just having this opportunity to work with Seth and be able to work exclusively online and, be able to just be in the woods kicking it with rabbits and chickens and, my MacBook and doing things, it kind of feels like, okay, I finally made it. Now, I've got a lot of check boxes to tick off on creative endeavors, but just being able to say, okay, I'm a professional now at doing this, and it's not just a side hustle or not just a hobby.
Right. That's amazing. Congratulations, by the way. That sounds like a dream life for a lot of people.
It's a dream.
You might not get rich doing it, but you're living it. And like, that's more important. Like, you have time freedom, right? And you're doing things with your time that are resonate, like aligned with your values and desires.
Exactly. My wife, Andrea, she's an artist, and, she was in the same position. So we just happened to have a piece of property that we had bought in the Ozarks. And, we were looking at, being bartenders some more, paying rent some more. And then we just decided, will that make us happy? And it was like, well, let's just move out to the woods in a tent. At least we'll have time to paint. At least we'll have time to write. And, we're no longer living in a tent, but we paid our dues, and we, we're very happy with what we're doing. Who's this guy? So I was going to talk about happiness, which I followed Paradise Earth with real quick. Is like I said, Paradise Earth was very, very grim. It was a cathartic novel, me working out all my feelings about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Happiness Next Exit started as a joke. I wrote it during a National Novel Writing Month, where you basically write a novel in a month. Not a very good novel ever, but, they can become one eventually. But I just wanted to just do something silly, so I was just like, I'm going to do a Jehovah's Witness romance novel. And just imagining what that was going to be like, She saw the flex of his JCPenney suit as he extended his arm with the boom mic. I want to become a 3-stranded cord with you, and just like all this stuff. So I had written this silly first draft of a Jehovah's Witness romance novel, and I was under contract with a publisher at the time who published my first novel. And they were asking me, okay, when's the next one coming out? When's the next one coming out? And I was like, oh, I don't have that, but I have this one, thinking that they were going to be like, okay, this is great, Anthony, but not really what we're looking for. But instead they said, oh, we love this. And then I was like, oh, shit, now I got to make this into an actually good book. And so Happiness, it started out as a joke. In the end, it became a very, very sweet novel, a very heartfelt novel, one that I can't see myself writing again, but it's weird, but that one turns out to be the one I'm most proud of, even though it's written as kind of a new adult style novel, but it's just a sweet story. And it's not so overly grim towards the witnesses. It's like, oh, there were good times too. We went to the district convention, and it was a lot of fun to get a half frozen Danish and an all the way frozen orange juice, to go out to Red Lobster, the fancy place, to go to New York, to Bethel for the first time. And, it's just
the Midwestern JW experience. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Keep
And
going.
like that was the fun stuff for me. I mean, I was just throwing stuff in there that made me joyful. I mean, don't sue me, Reed, if you're listening to this, but I included Pop Riveter lyrics in there. It didn't say Pop Riveter, but I had the lyrics to that song about showing love and stuff. And I wrote this from the perspective of a 21 or 20-year-old female, but like in many ways it was my story. It was the story of me and my ex-wife Rebecca, getting out of the witnesses, really, like getting some new ideas, and trying to go into the congregation and showing love, and then just getting that pushback on it, and that eventually lead to dismissal, disfellowshipping. But I really like that one. That'll be the first one that I am republishing, and yeah, I'd be happy to have it a part of whatever you guys got going on, because it's not anything I'm looking to make money off of, but I think it's a sweet story, and I think it will resonate with some people.
I want to jump in and say I've been thinking about this for a while. I'd like to create like a creators circle or like a private group for people, musicians, artists, authors, because there's so many things, and it doesn't have to be, we can make a super tight one, but we can also make a broad open one. But the idea is like people might come out of the woodwork to support and have an idea, or like want to do graphics for you or something, And there's a few people that came to mind just when you were telling the story of happiness and how funny the perspective is, or at least the inception of it, is three people. Henry Gilroy, who wrote the Star Wars, the Clone Wars animation series. He's an ex-witness. He showed up for a film festival.
Huh.
And he's been at Star Wars for years. Like, he has an amazing job there. And really, really nice guy. And then Bonnie Root is an actress in LA. They're both in LA. And she came out of the film festival as well. And she had a pilot short, but she's turning it into a feature right now. And she's super connected. And I mean, she's been in the industry forever.
Maybe we're doing a movie. Three of us as a creative team here. We take Anthony's script, Scott's directing, I'm Gopher, and then get some connected people to know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say those two people have their own script that they're working on. They're both related to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So one is a post-apocalyptic. Henry Gilroy's. I'm not sure how much I can give away, but like something about a post-apocalyptic 1975 related period piece. And nice. Then hers is more like about abuse. And she did a pilot short that is now used in like education world about how predators function. And wants to do a feature, and she has like name talent in her short. And anyway, it's like super exciting because that stuff's all like coming soon. And I've met some younger filmmakers who are doing some shorter stuff related to the topic. They're not necessarily like the witnesses, let's get them, but like Henry's is more on the nose about it, where hers is more like one of the characters is, or some people in the film are also a period piece in the 80s. Interesting stuff.
I think that's awesome that people are doing stuff, and that's just what I've always been about, is like, finding people that are creative, and, how can we team up to make things happen? I meet young kids today that they're not Jehovah's Witness, but they're in their own little cults and stuff like that. And like, I promised every one of those kids, the first novel you write, you bring it to me. I will pro bono edit it. I will help you put a cover together. We will get it out, because I just have a heart for people, that are trying to do stuff with limitations. And once you're out, I think we need to do what we can to support each other and what we're doing, not just for our sakes, but for, the next younger generation that's coming out, so that they too have opportunities.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. It's really nice that you can offer that. I was thinking of, when I first had the idea to make something on this topic of shunning, which we did with Witness Underground, I had this feeling like it was this gigantic mountain of a project that would be so hard to even wrap my head around how would you do it or what it would be. And it was like that for years. But knowing that there's people who are willing to give advice, and people I've met so many people, whether they're super connected or just like a novice, just trying for fun, like people are always willing to like chat about it. It seems a lot of people are really often willing to chat about it, at least, if not like support it. It's really cool that you offer that.
Did I tell you I wrote a film script once when I was a Jehovah's Witness?
You did not?
Yeah, you sent me a copy of that.
Yeah, it's so cringe to read it right now, but it's awesome. It's honest. It's written. It was called. It's called Truth, I think.
Yep.
And it was about being a young Jehovah's Witness, going to skating rinks and going to house parties, and then the most traumatic thing in life is when someone decides to leave the truth. And it's very cringy. It's the best Jehovah's Witness drama that was never made. I'll say that. I almost wish the Watchtower would make it. But it was
send
just,
it up and see if you can get it on jw.net or whatever.
Right?
JW
I would
TV.
love to see them do it, but they'd butcher it because it was too honest for what we were all good Jehovah's Witness kids. We were pioneering or whatever, but whatever. You go to a party in the city with the quote unquote city witnesses, we called them. That kind of had looser standards than the rest of us. I don't know if you guys had that in Minneapolis, but the St. Louis witnesses, they could, do whatever they could do and not get into trouble. But we were in the more outskirts, and our congregations were stricter, that sort of thing. So yeah, Truth.
I had a funny thing.
Truth. Look for that at your next district convention. Hopefully,
I'm gonna look around on the Nuclear Gopher shelves. I'm pretty sure it's here somewhere.
Right. It's
there was
so
this
cringy. Oh, you're gonna leave the truth. You're gonna leave the truth. But it's honest, and I respect its honesty. I mean, I called it Truth, and it was truthful to what a 21-year-old Jehovah's Witness was going through.
To speak to the double standard, there was this after school hangout place called Cons in my hometown, in the downtown strip, and they had video games, pinball, sodas, and burgers, and it was all really cheap. And it was people leave high school, walk to Cons, hang out for 30 minutes or an hour, play games, play the one pool table. And then I went in there twice with my high school buddies, and some new elder got into town. He's like, you were seen walking into Cons. You have something to say for yourself? And I was like, I could be walking into any building on the planet with my friends. Why is that a problem place? I hung out with those people for 8 hours a day for the last 4 years. And then I go to Minneapolis, and it's the witnesses are hanging out at the bars after every meeting. And I was like, well, what's the difference here? We're all hanging out with strangers. And every witness is drinking. So I'm going to a sober kids only hangout with the same people I just went to class with. Anyway, I thought it was shocking and refreshing in Minneapolis to go to the bars. Post-meeting bars. Everyone needs a drink after going to a meeting.
Oh, we used to take Tuesday nights. We would head downtown to downtown Minneapolis and go to Brit's Pub for the Britpop nights.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so much fun. We would
Wait, Britpop night?
Yeah, they had Britpop night. And
That's cool.
so they would have a DJ playing all the Britpop. This would have been late 90s, early 2000s. And we used to go down there and it would literally we'd call other people at other congregations. Okay, after the meeting tonight, Brits, and we would drive into the city from out the outskirts, out in Apple Valley or Lakeville or whatever, just so we could go hang out. And then we'd shoot pool, drink martinis, and listen to Britpop music for hours, and then almost get arrested on the way home.
And lawn bowling.
Yes, I never did the lawn bowling. Other people did.
That's the weirdest thing about that place. I've never seen it anywhere else in the world, but they have this huge rooftop, and it's a lawn, and you can roll balls on it. It's a version of British bowling on the roof at Brit's
We
Pub.
probably didn't do that because we were only there at night, and it just never sounded like a good idea to go outside. But
it's like playing cornhole.
I remember coming home from there one night with my roommate was driving, and he had a lot more to drink than I realized, and we got pulled over when he blew past a cop about 90 miles an hour, and the cop pulled us over, did a sobriety test, didn't give him a breathalyzer, but he walked a line, and he's like, "How far away do you live?" And then he's like, "Get home safe." And we got home, and I was like, "Man, that would have wrecked the entire night at Brit's." That was all I was worried about. If you would have gotten a DUI, man, we would have been in so much trouble with the elders tomorrow.
Ruins your life for a year.
But I wasn't even worried about us getting ticketed or crashing the car. I wasn't driving. I didn't realize, but it was just, we can get in trouble with the elders. And then we don't get to go to Brits anymore after the meetings because they'll clamp down.
Well, that was always the thing. It was always, you were just waiting for the other shoe to drop no matter what you were doing. And, you know, like the guys that were athletic, you know, that would arrange soccer games or something. And, you know, they'd all be having fun. And then inevitably it'd be like some local needs on the spirit of competition. And, okay, no one can play soccer anymore. You know what I mean? It's just like whatever it was only a matter of time before something happened that was maybe not exactly witness kosher, a little borderline questionable or something like that, and it gets shut down, you know?
Yeah.
So,
if there wasn't adultery or a crime or child sex abuse or physical abuse, there was going to be some other problem they were going to invent that was equally as important for like God to love you or not love you, or, you know, like.
Exactly.
Yeah, but to that point too, though, about like, do you guys remember the times when you would be doing stuff and having fun with your friends, and at the end of the night, you knew you were maybe a little on like an edge of what would be considered propriety, and you all kind of look at each other like, we're all good, right? Like nobody's going to, you know, and it was almost like this sort of
confess.
Yeah, there was almost like this worry that like if you know, you're going to wind up having somebody snitching to elders about how, you know, something borderline inappropriate took place, even if nobody's like really doing anything bad, nobody's, you know, like mainlining heroin while you know, on top of a pile of hookers, right? Like you're just kids hanging out, but you all have to worry about if like you hang out a little too much fun and then somebody's gonna tell a dang elder and then you're in trouble.
We had this dude.
Did that ever happen with you guys?
Yeah, we had this dude. You know, if you're old Wood River Congregation alumni and checking in on what Anthony's doing, I'm going to name drop you there, Casey. Casey was this guy. He would hang out with us, and he'd be all in the mix doing whatever. And again, it was nothing bad. We were watching a rated R David Lynch movie or something, and couples were sitting too close on the couch. It was nothing. It was no like drugs or adult or fornication or anything like that. But he would inevitably be the one the next day to feel bad about it and then go narc us out to the elders just because he felt guilty. It's like, well, if you got to get some sins off your chest, brother, go get them out. But don't drag us into this, you know?
Right. Exactly.
We're just trying to watch Eraserhead. So what is this Eraserhead? We're going to have to watch that. You know, it's like, please don't, elders. You won't get it.
I would love it if a body of elders was forced to watch Eraserhead against their will, though, to investigate something. That would be awesome. You should include that scene in your next book.
Oh, I wanted to do a test.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just say, don't include Eraserhead in anything. That movie's weird.
So Ryan, I pitched before you came on an idea, just a random idea for our October push, right? We're doing our crowdfund mega, bring all the artists, push all the shows and artists and books and music to the top. What can we do for Anthony? First thing comes to mind, just as it's not a test. It's like a brainstorm.
Oh, that's a question for me.
Yeah. What do you think? Yeah.
Oh boy, I wasn't ready for that. What do we do for Anthony? Well, for one thing, Anthony, is there any chance you have residual copies of anything that you've written before that you need to get out there? Out of the closet and into the world?
Absolutely not. The only thing is I am going to, this will put the little match under my foot to like republish Happiness before October, which isn't a big deal. It's ready to go. I just got to republish it under a new imprint, Nuclear Gopher.
It sounds like we just got some planning and work to do there, my friend.
Beautiful. We can at least do pre-sales, project, but and we'll ship it in November. Yeah, we'll ship in November after the crowdfund is complete. So you have 2 months.
And then you can get the Jehovah's Witness romance novel with all the hot JCPenney action you want.
Oh, speaking of JCPenney,
get your niche craved too.
The other person I wanted to mention was Tony Duchesne. Have you both seen Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk?
Or I've read the novel? Book, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. The novel's awesome. and everyone should go buy his book because that directly supports Tony, and he's an amazing ex-witness. He's super funny, and he runs an incredible, plug him, he runs an incredible podcast that's just for authors. He's an author, he interviews authors, and he does a free writing course through the UCLA extension. But it's called Drinks with Tony, and it used to be in a bar, and then it turned into a cafe, and now it's like, I think it's a cafe thing. Anyway, he wrote that book, Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk, and a big name director was his first documentary. Can't remember the guy's name at the moment. And it's actually distributed with indie rights. Eric Stoltz, thank you. And actually, I think I saw this. Is the film we're talking about today, Anthony, Dope Men, is that indie rights distribution?
That is.
It is. Okay,
Dope
cool.
Men's indie rights. We have another documentary I haven't talked about. It's called Nightlife. It's about a violence interrupter in North St. Louis that goes out kind of odd hours of the weekends and just tries to help people, but mostly just stop gang violence and stuff before it kicks off in the street. That's called Nightlife. That's also indie rights, and it's available Amazon, YouTube, Google, Apple. And then there's at least two others that are coming out from Outlaw Films through indie rights. Psychedelic Revolution, which is about the origins of LSD from the people that were there in the 60s and 70s. That one's coming out, and there's another one coming out. It's called A Tortured Mind. And it's mainly about an author who's no longer with us, is Ryan Leone, who had substance abuse problems and also spent some time in the feds. And A Tortured Mind's about post-incarceration syndrome. People that had problems going into prison weren't given the help they needed and basically kicked back out to the wolves after their release. And, drug abuse was worse. PTSD was worse because of the prison violence and things like that. So that's called A Tortured Mind. So
Wow.
That's at least 4 coming out through indie rights. The 2, Dope Men and Nightlife, are out right now through them.
And these are ones that you have been involved with?
Very loosely involved with them. I was mainly involved with Dope Men. Beyond that, my involvement in the other projects has been just more just consultation, just being part of the team. This is good. Oh, I like this. Or try this sort of thing. So
Valuable feedback.
Yeah, and then I do some social media, like little reels and little promo teasers and stuff for those films. But
That's cool.
I wasn't involved in the actual making of those.
I wanted to just...
But going forward, I'm going to be just more involved with doing animation and art direction for future documentaries coming out through Outlaw Films.
And that's building on kind of what you learned through Dope Men with bringing your graphic novel art into the animation for the movie. That build off
exactly.
of that.
I'm trying to master After Effects, and anytime you launch a whole new Adobe product, it's like
deep.
The skills aren't transferable from one to the other.
Yeah.
I've been doing social media work using Premiere Rush, which, nice and easy. And then I get into Premiere and it's like all new tool sets. And then After Effects is its own new beast. So,
if you need me Premiere
I'm
help,
learning little by little.
I want to do a course, and I think I might just start with showing tools on my channel, because other people can just find that and use it, but maybe I'll put a course together at some point. If you want to collaborate, if you want to if you have a question, I'm available for Premiere stuff. I beat my head against the wall until I feel like an expert. I built every documentary, every episode of everything in Premiere over the last 7 years.
Yeah. I'm such a noob with it. Like today, I was trying to figure out how to, split a clip or something, and it's like I had to hunt and go online. Oh, you got to look for this little razor icon over here.
Yeah,
that's the one you need.
Or the C key.
Oh, yeah, or the C. I haven't even learned the short keys yet, but it's like, oh, that's what that is. That's a razor blade. Oh, I get it. Cutting film. Okay.
It's funny because I took a whole course on how to use Premiere, and I wrote the guy. I was like, I don't understand how to cut anything. This is fundamental.
Right?
I just did a half an hour trying to find the razor blade. It's so funny that once you know it's there, of course you know it's there. But
I think that's funny.
But with After Effects, it's going to be like. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're the guest.
I was just going to say with After Effects, the thing I want to do is when we did the Dope Men documentary and using the comic art, we made it where you can, the things move around, the background's parallaxed and all that. But I actually want to get to where, I've got people's arms moving and going from 2D to movement in After Effects. That's my goal. But I've been watching online tutorials and it's pretty in depth, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
I wanted to say something about indie rights. I feel like I have this education that came from trying to distribute Witness Underground that could be valuable to someone listening. Is that there's like over 1,000 distribution companies, and indie rights is talked about a lot with a lot of positives. People love working with Linda Nelson and her team, and I kept on hearing about them. I kept reading about them. I was skeptical, but I kept on getting like sent her way until I finally submitted it to Indie Rights as like, how has this not been the first option? I've gotten 3 predatory bad deals on my table, and I'm so pissed that I'm the one. I paid for a guy to help me with this, and I have to be the one to navigate whether or not it's a good deal. And I did, and it took me like a year to figure out that Indie Rights was the one. In the end, her teammate turned it down, but Linda still gave me a call, and she's like, "Well, it was my teammate, and I trust her implicitly. She's been doing this for 30 years, so if she says it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But I'm happy to have a call with you. Let's talk." We're talking, and she's like, "Let me just look it up. I don't know anything about your movie." "Oh, I see it's about music." "Oh, we're terrible at music documentaries. We've never made a dime with those. Like, that's why it's not like we don't want your film. It's probably a great film, I'm sure. But we want to both be able to make money, right? Like, we haven't successfully figured that out." And then she looked at the website and she's like, "Oh, Jehovah's Witnesses, I distributed Tony Duchesne's film, Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? That's amazing. Like, I just had breakfast with Tony." Like, that's so cool. I had no idea that film's distributed. It's like my favorite film in the whole space on the topic of witnesses. I think it's hilarious. And there's a J.C. Penney catalog moment that's so funny. And there's like the 2 witnesses in service rubbing their legs together. And like, it's sort of portrayed like Jehovah's Witness blowjob in the film. And it's like,
oh, for sure.
It's like this sexual experience in going door to door, touching thighs through cotton. Anyway, so Linda and I are having this whole conversation about how awesome that film is and laughing. And then she's like, "I think the right move is Film Hub for your film, but like the problem is finding the audience." And she said, like, you really need like 1 million views, otherwise it's just not really financially viable. So try to find 1 million ex-witnesses. You probably need to break beyond the boundaries of the ex-witness world, which I hope we can do. And for everyone involved in this ex-witness world, like, yeah, we have this obvious connection, but we need to move our art outside the community if we want it to like make a global impact of some kind, maybe. But anyway.
And I think Witness Underground does that successfully. I mean, I've showed it to people that don't have witness backgrounds at all, and it resonates with them. So I do think there's an audience for it. And from what I understand, I'm not involved in the distribution angle on Outlaw Films, but I talked to Seth a lot about it. And it's tough these days. It's tough. And, fortunately, he was able to get in with Indie Rights because he did his research too on the thing, and they're like you said, they're the name that always comes up.
They make the same deal as Film Hub
and actually paying.
Yeah, they work for it. They're real people working for it. Where Film Hub's like, they have a team of people that get your stuff on other platforms, but they're not. I don't know. It's a very different model. It's distribution versus aggregation, and that's the thing I'm learning. So we're going the aggregation route because the distributors are saying they don't think they can make money with it, which is fine. Then it's on us to make the money with it and like push and do the marketing, which is what we're all kind of talking about. Like, how do we elevate the content that we're making in this space, or about these topics, or how do you elevate these stories? Like, can we get Anthony's books out there, and will they resonate with non-former cult members?
I honestly think that we. Sorry, I was just going to say, for your question there, Scott. I think that this, in my experience, Witness Underground has already resonated more with people who have no connection to the witnesses than to witnesses. In just more often, I think more people are already. let me put it this way. Most people are already, if they're a witness or they're an ex-witness, they're already in a baked position about the whole concept. They're not going to get a lot of enlightenment out of the movie. An actual witness might, if they're on the edge and they need a push or something. But the people who see the movie who go in blind with no preconceptions about Jehovah's Witnesses and they've never heard of this stuff, they don't like weird outsider art music, whatever, and then watch the movie, they get insight and new information in a way that the people inside the community don't get. And everybody who's like really kind of, the majority of the people who have really kind of responded to the movie strongly that I've interacted with, where they've had the strongest reactions, weren't witnesses ever. So I think, it's not just about audience size, but it's about what the film actually does. If I watched a movie about this and it was about, I don't know, Scientologists, and I don't know anything about their culture internally, and I've never been one, but I watched the movie and it would resonate with me because of sympathetic vibrations on different things that I experienced as a witness, or, other kind of thing like that. So I think, if you only showed, polar bear documentaries to people who already loved polar bears, it's not going to be any fun, and that's not your audience. It's everybody. So why should this be limited to the specific, audience of people who happen to have left a cult that only has 7 million members in the first place?
Yeah. I can't. I'm just so biased towards the documentary, like very, very biased towards it. So I don't know that my opinion matters, but I love it. I absolutely love what you did with it. I mean, shoot, I watched it like 3 or 4 times, almost over successive 4 days, just because, like, I don't know, it put everything in perspective for me. Like, it just, everything suddenly made sense in ways that, I hadn't. Mainly just because I hadn't thought about it in forever. I was content to just, all right, we're going on with our lives now. Oh, what's that witness thing? Oh, that's a bridge I burned years ago. I don't want to go back. I don't want to relive that trauma. I don't want to relive those memories. But the word cathartic is used too often in these conversations. But it was really powerful for me, the doc. And if you haven't watched it already, like, please support the Patreon. Check it out, because I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I'm excited for the whole world to see it. That's the goal, right? One way or another, I want people to know about it.
Right.
I think it'll affect change.
I'm not familiar with. Yeah, I don't know Film Hub. Is that just another distribution place or something like that? So
the difference in distribution and distribution has real people who have real relationships at all the streaming services, and they champion your film. They believe that it has value, and they're picking up lots of films. So at some point they have a library, and they can't, their time and energy and love is divided between how big their library is. Ultimately, it's about going in and selling that film because they really understand it. They really think it has value or social impact, or they think they can make good money on it because it has many good elements as a piece of entertainment. Or an aggregator, they have kind of blanket deals, and they basically built this particular one built a software, and it's sort of like, yeah, we have business relationships with these groups, and if anyone could submit to them, and they will put it in front of the people at those businesses, and those people might read the sentence about the film, the log line. They might look at the poster art. They might watch the trailer. And at any point, they might just stop doing any of that, and they might actually watch it if they are intrigued enough. But they don't have someone saying, we love this film. I think this is perfect for your channel, which is the difference. It's a different kind of relationship. And it's on me to sort of sell it properly, which is why I've been like, let's get the copy correct. Like, this is our only chance of someone reading this sentence. It needs to hook them. So it's been a long, slow thing because we're doing the irrigation route. Yeah.
Right. I hear that, and I hear it from Seth and other people. It's a whole new world out there of how this all works, with streaming and stuff, and the traditional ways aren't working, and no one kind of really knows what's the best new way to do it. And but I don't know. I have faith in the project, and I think we'll get that audience.
Yeah, I kind of had to switch recently, which was I was reading these like standard film release pathways, and they're all like, well, you have a 90-day window, and it's, like, well, Barbie came out, and like, how did they do it? It's just like that. Copy Barbie's model, get it into theaters, and then do a four-wall yourself, where you buy the theater, buy all the seats, and you sell the tickets yourself, and then you promote for a month in advance, and you hit the targeted. You do this whole like thing, and it doesn't make any sense for a social impact documentary. Like, there's 100,000-ish people leave this religion every year. This is going to be a slow burn, and there's going to be people going back to this thing. People don't watch documentaries more than once. Usually people that watch this documentary repeatedly say something like you, like, I watched it twice. I watched it 3 times. You said, this is the first time I think someone said they watched it 4 times. And it's like would you say, like, right back to back, like in the same few days?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I watched it. I watched it again. I just kept watching it, man. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
It's interesting, right? Like, that's not normal. Not that you're not normal, but like, that's not how usually people deal with documentaries. Like, I really enjoyed Dope Men. Yeah. I have watched it. I got it, and it was good. But I will tell people about it because it's a good film.
But like with Outlaw Films and what Seth's trying to do, I mean, a large part of his thing is activism. With Dope Men, he's trying to tell the story of how this crazy war on drugs started. Mm-hmm. With Psychedelic Revolution, it's not just talking about the history of LSD. It's bringing it into the modern era of how, it's being used now in different clinical studies, to do things. He's got Tangled Roots, which is about, the legacy cannabis growers in Northern California that are getting squeezed out by the commercialization of cannabis by big agriculture.
Is that a series that's streaming right now? I just watched something like that.
Tangled Roots it's not out just yet. It'll be out, I think, early next year. But it's about Humboldt County, what they call the Emerald Triangle. It's like a lot of these malcontents from the 60s, the hippie era, went up there and kind of homesteaded. And during the years of Prohibition, they really, really crafted some good cannabis, that became, the premier cannabis. But now that, big ag's coming in, it's no longer the boutique cannabis growers now. It's the big industrial growers. And unfortunately, these people that perfected a lot of these strains and did so, versus the risk of incarceration all that year, they're kind of getting squeezed to the side.
Right.
And, can Humboldt County kind of become the Napa Valley of cannabis, where people who are super into it, want to have like the very best, and go farm to farm or whatever it's going to be. But just, it's a film about looking out for the little guys, so to speak, the people that really champion cannabis throughout these long years of Prohibition. And now that many states are legalizing, it's like, okay, we can't let these people get left in the dust because they paid the ultimate price to get it to where it's at now. Yeah. Anyway, that's what that film's about.
So interesting. Another thing that brings up is we have so many incarcerated Americans. Like, it's 24% of the planet's prisoners are Americans, and most of them are non-victim criminals. And a lot of it has to do with marijuana usage, not even selling. So, like, possession of marijuana.
Actually,
does he ever talk about getting those people out of prison, or is there any movement to like have a change in that space?
Well, Seth's really into that because he's, as I mentioned, he spent 21 years locked up. He was nonviolent. They called him a kingpin, but he really wasn't. He was just dealing to old high school buddies at various colleges on the East Coast.
Wow.
He got a 21-year sentence for distributing cannabis and LSD. And, he was locked up. He was a white guy locked up, but for every Seth Ferranti in the prison, there was 10, 20, 30 black guys locked up, for crack in the inner city and or just cannabis in the inner city. So, his whole thing is like the war on drugs, it filled the prisons. It made a lot of money for people, but was it the right thing to do, to take away someone's life over a nonviolent crime, especially something that's involving cannabis, something that's, like I said, legal in, I guess it's most states now to various extents. And also like with LSD coming and psychedelics and mushrooms and things like that, that's even starting to open up. Mm-hmm. And, people are giving it a second look. Can we use this to treat PTSD? Can we use this to treat, cluster headaches or migraines or, whatever someone's suffering with?
Yeah.
So that's kind of been his advocacy. You know, the war on drugs, it's failed. It was a wrong thing that happened in society. And, you know, what can we do now to change things, that affect change, to, you know, get these nonviolent offenders, you know, another chance at life, and without all these heavy mandatory sentences that were imposed during kind of the Reagan era forward.
There's a great point made in Dope Man about the self rejuvenating trend of illicit narcotics or any kind of illegal substance that people have, there's a demand for, is that as soon as the person at the top is gone who's making all the money, and there's incentive to get rid of them, because then someone else there's always someone to fill the spot. And anytime it gets taken out, there's a void. Okay, there's people that want this product, so people are going to deliver that product, especially when they're well incentivized monetarily to do so. And it's been that way, as the film describes, since Prohibition. And that was a bunch of rich elites who were using alcohol and drugs, made it illegal so that they could, and then they maintained this illegal, they created the illegal market, right? And which means they had to have an illegal military or pay people off or work with the government and do all this nefarious stuff that we have to this day. Like, legalize, it's actually, we're in this like beautiful renaissance that was like peaking in the late 60s with psychedelics, especially, that we've lost the people that kept it alive. We're losing that knowledge, and it's amazing to have it come back. What it took, since the 60s. So how many years is that? 60 years of missed human knowledge, lost human knowledge.
I actually had been wanting to mention, while we're waiting for Anthony, I had been wanting to mention one on the topic of the marijuana. A couple of years back, there was a documentary made from Michael Pollan's book, The Botany of Desire. And
the series on Netflix.
Yeah. I guess it was before marijuana legalization came to Minnesota, but I don't know how many years ago it was. Maybe it was only 3 or 4 years, but there was a PBS one that was made as well. But it's fascinating because when they go into talking about marijuana, they talk about, how what Anthony was saying, like people dedicated such ingenuity and resources and time and attention to various cultivars and strains and learning how to like manipulate this plant in this sort of, because the plant was providing us with the fulfillment of the desire for our sort of the psychoactive component. And then we're providing the plant with whatever it will want. And it's such an interesting plant because it will take all the UV you can throw at it. It like can be really mutated into different shapes and forms and manipulated in interesting ways. And for all of that work to have been done under cover of darkness, off in the shadows with potential life sentences, and then to have big pharmaceutical companies being able to come in and take, I'll take that fantastic kush there. I'll take that amazing indica there. And they can just take all that results of all that hard work and they can monetize it and sell it is a little bit infuriating. Like, it's more than a little bit infuriating, but, especially, I mean, my God, people who served massive terms of incarceration for growing a goddamn plant that was also cultivated by the founding fathers is bizarre, right? It just very, makes no strange sense at all. And
right. And it doesn't, people probably shouldn't operate heavy machinery on it, but it chills people out. Like, people aren't doing violent crimes on or for marijuana. They're like, let's relax and like have good vibes and like chill. And like, how is that the one that's such a problem? Meanwhile, like meth,
it's the gateway,
opium,
right? Yeah, it's the idea is that
that's what they say.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Gateway.
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that was the argument. The argument was, oh, sure, you just start with the wacky weed, but before you know it, you've got a spike in your arm, and it's like, okay, maybe that's true for some people that they did use the one before graduating to the others, but some people just drank and then wound up in an opium den in the 1800s. It's not about the chemical, it's about the person, and it's about whether or not they are have an addictive constitution. in many cases. Some people are more constitutionally prone to addiction. It runs in families. There's statistics and genetics and research.
It can often be tied to trauma experiences as well.
It can be that as well. And in any case, I mean, criminalizing a plant is a weird thing. I don't know why the United States decided to do that, but I'm glad they're undoing it. I'm glad it's come to my state.
Yeah, congratulations, Minnesota.
Yes. Good work, guys.
I watched a series on the same topic recently. In California, especially, they're talking about the taxation laws to get legalization for the plant. And the reason why Big Pharma is coming in, they probably had something to do with those laws, because it's incredible. It's an incredible hurdle for small-time companies to make it, because the way things are taxed, banking is illegal because it's a federal thing and all the banks are federal. So they can't actually, it's illegal to put their money into banks. So but they can make 60 to 100K a month. So they have piles of cash, but then just protect the cash, they have to hire armed gunmen because they're getting robbed and raided for their money or their product all the time. And so they have to hire this like basically underground military or security force. Plus they can't use banks. So they have to buy property to launder the money, but they have to launder the money. And that's legal. They can do that because it's in the state, you can use that money to do things and it's legal money. But then they have to pay this like crazy tax, but the taxation is on the gross, not the net. So they have to pay tax on the gross while hiring employees with that same money. So like out of $100, for every $100 they make, they only actually get like 40 after the taxation and the employee costs and then the healthcare and all the stuff they have to provide legally. It's like this crazy.
Well, isn't that kind of what happens though? If like over the years, in order to fight the drug war, they put up all these different types of laws, right? Lots and lots of regulations, lots of things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Well, just going ahead and making legalization a fact doesn't take all those other regulations down de facto. So all of a sudden what you're pointing out, like all those unintended straggler things that now also need to get changed in order to, okay, yep, no, you can use a bank. Okay, now you don't need a private militia, right? Now, like, that won't come for years yet.
Right.
Because
we're already into this for decades and it's still a problem, right?
Yeah.
And this is why big companies are able to swoop in and like take market share.
Yep.
Because they have the money behind them already. They're not working from needing to make profit of this year's crop like a normal farmer or the small time ones.
Yep. Well, also you have to, at least in where I've seen in Michigan, I haven't visited any in Minnesota yet, but in Michigan, I've been to dispensaries and also in California. In both cases, they always have to have like a lab tested, certified, controlled process, right? Like for that. And that's not the same as a vegetable stand on the corner for your CSA or whatever either, right?
Right.
So yeah, the barriers to entry and the barriers to success are pretty high. That is going to make it more difficult for the small folks, the startups. But
Anthony, while you popped off, we were carrying the torch on the topic of marijuana and challenges for the small farmers.
Yeah, I just hope people, who are interested in, mafia, true crime, Lucky Luciano, the war on drugs, etc. Check out Dope Men. It's available on, like I said, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, Google Play, wherever you can buy and rent films. Hopefully in the future, it'll go on a streaming service like Tubi, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Especially if you have a Kindle, check out the Lucky graphic novel by Christian Cipollini and Yevgeny Frantsev. It took a decade to make. It's really kind of unique as far as a graphic novel. It's not just the comic book. That's a huge part of it, telling the story of Lucky Luciano's life. Christian Cipollini, he's the foremost expert on this guy. He lives and breathes Lucky Luciano. So it's highly detailed. We've got articles in there. We've got essays. We've got behind the scenes. We've got, everything about the subject and beyond. So it's really a cool book. I'm really happy with how it came together and definitely encourage people who are into comics, graphic novels, Lucky Luciano, The Mob, true crime, definitely take a look at that one.
I never read graphic novels, and I was fully sucked in. I think you did a great job and I was really enjoying it. I want to finish it. Yeah.
I read a lot of graphic novels, and I'm very excited about this one. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to probably today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I like the artist
Would
in
you
the book.
say
He's
10-year project? Go ahead.
No, it just takes a lot of time to do it. I mean, it's hand drawing all that stuff, and the artist Yevgeny, he's a Russian. His background isn't America 1920s. But he watched a lot of Goodfellas and Godfather and all this stuff to learn how to draw the cars and the gangsters and stuff. By the end of the 10-year project, we joked, like none of us want to draw a fedora again in our lives because comic books, it takes time, especially, when it's not somebody's full-time job, it's more of a side hustle thing, that you got to squeeze in. So I'm thrilled to see that project to its completion. Because it's one thing to start something, it's another thing to finish it. And, whether it took 1 year or 10 years, I'm just so pleased that it's out, not just for the sake of Christian and the artist and the rest of us involved, but really it started as a Stash publishing project. And even though that comic creator group that I was in, Stash, even though we're no longer together doing it, it's nice to see some of these books live on and not just, fall by the wayside.
Is this your biggest work, or have you got a collection that came before this one?
Oh, this is the one I probably spent the most time with. But when we were involved with Stash, we did maybe like 10 anthologies that were pretty sizable books. Now, an anthology is just a bunch of short comics, maybe 4, 6, 8 pages in length around a central theme, be it horror, crime, or whatever it was. I did those. I helped produce some graphic novels for some people, a book called Z-Day, a book called Lost Owl Kingdom, which is kind of post-apocalyptic zombie type stuff. So I worked on a lot of comics. I wish I could say I have a graphic novel of my own, that I wrote and all that, and I hope to have that one day with Hemingway. But we were so ambitious with that project. It's all hand done. It's all hand watercolored. The lettering, the word balloons, normally you do that, with like Illustrator, some other digital format, those are all hand lettered and all, it's all done by hand. Wow. So we're kind of at the cusp of maybe 1-2 years before AI can do a comic book. So it's kind of cool to maybe in this era with something that's more of a old school, very little computers involved in it at all done by hand. So that's the best one I've ever done. I hope to see it finished just because it's just such a beautiful piece of art and super historically researched. And, we've got Nazis in there and it's Hemingway beating up Nazis. What more does anyone want in a comic book?
I'd read that. So that one's coming.
Yeah, hopefully.
And where can we follow your work? So we can get lucky now, right? As a digital version of the book,
or like a very expensive hardcover. Yeah, there's a hardcover out. It's strictly collectors. It's got a really high price tag. There'll be a soft cover that's more affordable coming out, but the best way for a person to read it is on Kindle, I think, unless they're a super avid Lucky fan. Then by all means, get that fancy limited edition hardcover. But check that out. Where can people follow me? You can come out to the woods and say hi, maybe fly an airplane overhead and wave. I kind of went through this phase where I went off the internet. I did. I dropped all my social media accounts and I haven't reestablished them just because I've been, Scott, what'd you call it? Dagobah mode?
Yeah, in Dagobah, like Yoda on the swamp planet.
Yeah.
in the Arkansas forest planet.
Yeah, I had a good decade where, I was out of the witnesses and I ran really, really hard and had a lot of adventures, a lot of ups and downs, good things, bad things, and everything in between. And just, it was a time to get away to the woods and figure some stuff out. And this is the first time I've been on a podcast in years. So people want to follow. What I'm doing, I don't know. I guess tune into this channel and we'll have to update people. But like, if people want to check out Gorilla Convict, just on Instagram, Gorilla Convict, or Instagram, Seth Ferranti, Ferranti, and also on YouTube, Seth Ferranti's True Crime. We're getting ready to relaunch his channel with like some mini video articles and all sorts of cool stuff.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to put the links to watch Dope Men. It's America's first Cartel. And to watch that on Amazon or other places, and the link to the Kindle version of the book, and a link for the collectors for the hard copy, and
Thank you.
Seth Ferranti's work, which it sounds like you're supporting him in a number of ways. It's not just this one project. That story was amazing. So thank you for sharing. I had no idea, and I think it's like really compelling to even when you're trapped in prison or in a cult, you can still make something. Seth Ferranti wrote a bunch of content telling stories from within prison. That's how he became famous. It was the general idea.
Yeah, like I said, it's like, he's proof that, any kind of obstacle that life throws your way, you can use it and turn it around and build something good out of it. And I think that should resonate with anybody who feels like they've been trapped in the Jehovah's Witness religion way too long with their life on hold. It's a prison of a different sort. And, I feel like that's why his story resonated with me. He's an inspiration on that mode for me too. And that's why I enjoy working with him and, helping him out with his projects.
Very cool. I have a problem with my website, which is I have so much art to share, but I would like to find a place to host this kind of content of yours. This particular content that we're talking about, I'll try to find a place to put it on the website as like, here's how you can go watch the film and buy the book. And then for your future content, when you come out, we'll make sure we can have a spot to like find your work, since you're not really on the internet otherwise, especially.
Should I get back on the internet?
Or we could get some sort of communal flight together to fly over Anthony's place.
Yeah, with the big
We got some
banners.
skydiving friends that could kick us out the window, kick us out the door.
Yeah. I like this idea. Let's do it that way.
The witnesses found me out in the woods, so I guess other people can as well.
Ex-witnesses had better be able to find you then.
They did? Oh, that's fantastic.
I got a very nice letter
enjoying
and
their hot
tract in the
chocolate.
mail. I was just we have to use wood to heat, so I burn all my junk mail, and I opened up this letter, and out falls a tract. I forgot what the tract was, Secret of Family Happiness or something like that. So I got in contact with the guy,
right.
and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm out here building a paradise. You want to come help?" No. We just want to talk about
Waiting
a
around
paradise.
for
We don't want to actually go ahead and build one with you. It's like, okay, well, I'm super witness because, I always thought my future would be cleaning up an apocalyptic wasteland and turning it into paradise, and here I am. I think about that every
you
time
fast
I'm out there
forwarded that.
picking up like a beer can or just some junk on the property left behind by someone. It's like, I'm cleaning up the earth just like I always thought I'd do. Every time I plant a flower, I'm building paradise.
That's a beautiful
Awesome.
way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah, all my hopes and dreams, everyone, all your hopes and dreams, everything you
pleasure,
want to do in
Anthony.
life, you will end up doing in your life. So just set your intentions, make sure they're good intentions, make sure that's what you want to do in life, and then just keep walking towards it. Sometimes you'll take baby steps, sometimes you'll take huge leaps where you ramp up to the next level. Just stay the course, and your dreams, no matter how much they've been curtailed in your life, your dreams will come true.
Hell yeah. That was a great finish. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That was
Thanks,
awesome.
Anthony.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
See you in the next one, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.